When are you leaving her? I can't keep waiting for... The text message flashed on my husband's phone during our anniversary dinner. What Michael didn't know when he excused himself from the table was that I had already discovered everything, including the insurance policy my late father had secretly set up that would activate if my marriage failed due to infidelity. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember exactly how the candlelight flickered across Michael's face when his phone lit up on the table between us. We were celebrating 10 years of marriage at Bellini's, the upscale Italian restaurant where he had proposed a decade earlier. I had spent hours getting ready, wearing the emerald dress he had always loved, my hair swept up the way he preferred it. The waiter had just poured our second glass of champagne, and Michael was midway through a story about his newest client when the notification appeared. It wasn't the gentle buzz that caught my attention. It was the way his expression changed. The slight widening of his eyes, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw, the way his hand moved just a fraction too quickly to turn the phone face down. But not before I caught a glimpse of the message preview. When are you leaving her? I can't keep waiting for The rest was cut off, but those 7 words were enough to instantly rewrite our entire history together. Sorry about that, Michael said smoothly, sliding the phone into his jacket pocket. Work never stops. You know how it is. His smile returned, practiced and perfect, as if nothing had happened, as if my world hadn't just tilted on its axis. Was that important? I asked, proud of how steady my voice remained while my heart hammered against my ribs. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow, he replied, raising his glass. To us, Natalie. To 10 incredible years and many more to... Come. I touched my glass to his, the crystal making a hollow sound that seemed to echo the emptiness suddenly spreading through my chest. As I sipped the expensive champagne he had ordered, Dom Perignon, my favorite, I calculated how long I had suspected something was wrong. 3 months? 4? The late nights at the office, the business trips that seemed to multiply, the new cologne I didn't recognize, the sudden password on his phone. All the signs had been there, but I had refused to see them clearly until this moment. Even as I sat across from him, smiling and nodding as he resumed his story, my mind was racing ahead. Who was she? How long had it been going on? Was it someone I knew? I've got a surprise for you, Michael said, reaching across the table to take my hand. His fingers were warm against mine, the same hands that had held me through my father's funeral last year, that had wiped away my tears during our fertility struggles, that had apparently been touching someone else while I waited at home. I've planned a weekend away next month. Just the 2 of us at that vineyard resort you've been wanting to visit in Sonoma. I forced another smile, wondering if she would be texting him then, too. That sounds wonderful. Michael excused himself to use the restroom shortly after our main course arrived, taking his phone with him. I knew exactly what he was doing, responding to her, assuring her, making promises. I cut into my barely touched salmon, remembering how excited I had been earlier today, wrapping the small gift box containing the vintage watch I had tracked down specifically because it matched one his grandfather had owned. When he returned 7 minutes later, yes, I timed it, there was a subtle change in his demeanor. A lightness, a slight flush to his cheeks that had nothing to do with the champagne or the warm restaurant. He had the look of a man who had just spoken to someone he desired, and for the first time in our marriage, that person wasn't me. We finished dinner with elaborate pretense, both performing our roles flawlessly. Michael, the devoted husband celebrating a milestone anniversary. Me, the adoring wife blissfully unaware of any betrayal. We even ordered dessert, tiramisu to share, just as we had on our first date. When he fed me a bite across the table, his eyes holding mine, I nearly broke character and asked him how he could sit there, acting out this charade. But I didn't. Something cold and clear had crystallized inside me during those hours, a determination I hadn't known I possessed. I would not confront him here, would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble in public. Instead, I would wait, observe, and plan my next steps carefully. The drive home was filled with his cheerful chatter about work successes and plans for the summer. I contributed just enough to seem normal, grateful that the darkness hid my expression. When we arrived home and he suggested opening another bottle of wine to continue our celebration, I agreed with a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "I'll open it," I told him. "Why don't you put on some music?" While Michael scrolled through his playlist, selecting the songs from our early dating days, I slipped into the kitchen and pulled out the bottle of Cabernet I had been saving for a special occasion. As I reached for the corkscrew in the drawer, my hand brushed against the small key I had hidden there weeks ago, the key to the safety deposit box my father had arranged before his death. Just in case, he had told me during one of our last conversations, pressing the key into my palm. I've seen how Michael looks at other women when he thinks no one is watching. Men like him, they don't change, sweetheart. I had been furious with my father then, defending Michael vehemently. How dare he suggest my husband would ever betray me? How dare he taint our relationship with his suspicion? Now, as Sinatra crooned "The Way You Look Tonight" from the living room speakers, the song we had first danced to at our wedding, I felt a wave of grief for having doubted my father's intuition. What I didn't know then, what Michael certainly didn't know, was exactly what my father had placed in that safety deposit box, or the specific conditions under which I was meant to open it. The irony wasn't lost on me that on the very night I had planned to finally tell Michael about my recent promotion, the executive position that would advance my career beyond his, I was instead mentally cataloging the signs of his infidelity. I carried the wine and glasses into the living room where Michael had dimmed the lights and moved the coffee table aside, creating space for us to dance. He took the wine from my hands, poured 2 generous glasses, and pulled me close. "Happy anniversary, beautiful," he murmured against my hair as we swayed to the music, his arm warm around my waist. I closed my eyes, remembering how safe I had once felt in these arms, how certain I had been of our future together. Now, as we moved across our living room floor in practice steps, I was achingly aware of the phone in his pocket, of the woman on the other end of those messages, of the careful plans I would begin making tomorrow. The text that had flashed on his screen played on repeat in my mind. "When are you leaving her? I can't keep waiting for..." For what? For him to find the right moment? For him to secure his finances? For him to break the news gently? Whatever she was waiting for, whatever Michael was planning, neither of them realized that with 7 careless words delivered at precisely the wrong moment, they had set in motion events that would change everything. Because tomorrow, while Michael was at his office, likely with her, I would be visiting that safety deposit box, unlocking the contingency plan my father had created. For exactly this scenario, as the song ended and Michael dipped me playfully, just as he had on our wedding day, I smiled up at him with newfound clarity. "I love you," I said, the familiar words now a strategic move in a game he didn't yet know we were playing. "I love you too," he replied, his eyes warm and convincing. He had always been an excellent liar. I just hadn't realized until tonight that he had been lying to me all along. Before we continue with what happened the morning after my anniversary, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this story is resonating with you, make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Tomorrow, I'm sharing my Trust Your Gut checklist, the exact warning signs I ignored that could have saved me months of heartache. Michael and I met 11 years ago at a charity auction where I was coordinating corporate sponsorships. He arrived with the law firm's contingent, tall, confident, with a smile that seemed reserved just for me despite the crowded room. When he outbid everyone for a weekend sailing package I'd helped organize, he immediately asked if I'd join him. "I don't actually know how to sail," he confessed later that evening over drinks. I just wanted a reason to ask for your number. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Our courtship was a whirlwind of thoughtful gestures and passionate connection. Weekend trips to coastal towns, surprise picnics in hidden city parks, handwritten notes left on my pillow when he had early morning meetings. 6 months in, he proposed during a sunset dinner at Bellini's, dropping to one knee as the restaurant staff circled with champagne. "You're the only woman I'll ever want, Natalie," he promised, sliding the diamond onto my finger. My forever and always. I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? Michael was exactly what I'd always wanted. Ambitious yet attentive, driven in his career but devoted in his personal life. Or so I thought. We married in a tasteful ceremony at the Botanical Gardens, surrounded by 150 guests, who toasted our perfect match. My father, Harold, walked me down the aisle with obvious reluctance. Though he smiled for the photos, his skepticism about Michael was an ongoing tension between us. "He's too polished, too practiced," my father insisted during one particularly heated discussion before the wedding. "Men who charm everyone aren't trustworthy." "You're just being overprotective," I countered. "Michael's successful and confident. That doesn't make him untrustworthy." My father, a self-made business owner who'd built his construction company from scratch after my mother died when I was 12, valued substance over style. He'd raised me alone, teaching me to appreciate honesty, hard work, and loyalty above all else. In his eyes, Michael's designer suits and country club memberships were red flags, not achievements. "Just promise me you'll protect yourself," he said finally, recognizing he couldn't change my mind. "Keep your career, your independence. Don't lose yourself in becoming his wife." I promised, partly to appease him and partly because I believed my career was important too. After the wedding, I continued working as an event director for a major hotel group, coordinating high-profile corporate functions and building a solid professional reputation. Michael, meanwhile, ascended rapidly through the ranks at Bennett and Walsh, a prestigious law firm specializing in corporate mergers. Our early married years were comfortable and, I thought, happy. We settled into a beautiful townhouse in Westlake Hills, joining the right social circles, hosting dinner parties for Michael's colleagues, and beginning to plan for a family. We agreed to wait until Michael made partner, a goal he pursued with single-minded intensity. The first hairline fractures in our marriage appeared so gradually I didn't recognize them for what they were. Michael began working later, missing dinners I'd carefully prepared. Weekend plans were increasingly canceled due to urgent client matters. When I'd express disappointment, he'd soothe me with expensive gifts and promises of future time together. "This is temporary," he'd assure me. "Once I make partner, everything will be different. We'll have the time and the money to do everything we've dreamed of." I believed him because I needed to, because the alternative was too painful to consider. When we celebrated his partnership 3 years into our marriage with a lavish party at the firm, I was genuinely proud of his accomplishment. That night, as we danced among his colleagues and their impeccably dressed spouses, I felt we'd reached a milestone that would usher in the next phase of our life together. "Now we can start trying for a baby," I whispered in his ear as he held me close. He tensed slightly, then relaxed with practiced ease. "Let's enjoy this moment first," he replied. "We have all the time in the world." But the partnership didn't deliver on its promises. Instead of more time together, Michael's schedule became even more demanding. Important client dinners, firm retreats, industry conferences. There was always some essential event that required his presence, but not mine. When I suggested accompanying him on a trip to Chicago, his response was tellingly defensive. "These aren't vacations, Natalie. I'm working 16-hour days. You'd be bored and alone in the hotel. The shift in our physical relationship was equally telling. Passionate nights became increasingly rare, replaced by quick kisses and excuses about stress and exhaustion. When we did connect intimately, I sometimes felt Michael was somewhere else entirely, going through motions that once came naturally. After 2 years of trying to conceive without success, we began fertility treatments. The process was physically and emotionally draining for me, but Michael seemed strangely detached. He missed appointments due to work conflicts, responded to emails during our consultations, and reacted to our repeated failures with a resignation that bordered on relief. "Maybe we're not meant to be parents," he suggested after our third unsuccessful IUI procedure. "We have a good life, just the two of us. Do we really need to put ourselves through more of this?" His words cut deeper than he knew. Did he truly believe we weren't meant to be parents, or just that he wasn't meant to be a parent with me? My father's health began declining around our 7th anniversary, a slow progressing heart condition that gradually sapped his formidable strength. Michael was surprisingly attentive during this period, joining me for hospital visits and handling logistics when my focus was solely on my father's care. I interpreted this as evidence of his fundamental goodness, his ability to show up when it truly mattered. What I didn't know then was that my father was watching Michael carefully during those hospital visits, noticing things I was too preoccupied to see: the frequent phone checks, the hallway conversations, the convenient coffee, runs whenever difficult medical discussions arose. 6 months before he died, during a rare moment alone while Michael was on one of his important calls, my father took my hand. "Natalie, I need to talk to you about something important," he began, his voice weaker but his eyes as sharp as ever. "About Michael and about your future." I shook my head, not wanting another critique of my husband. "Dad, not now, please." "Yes, now," he insisted with unexpected firmness. "I may not have another chance. I've made arrangements with my attorney, Peter Griffith. After I'm gone, I want you to go see him." "Dad." "Just listen. Peter has instructions regarding a special fund I've set up. It's for you, but only under specific conditions." He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll go see him if things with Michael ever change." The vagueness of his request confused me, but I promised just to ease his mind. When Michael returned minutes later, my father's expression shifted to careful neutrality, and the subject wasn't raised again. When my father passed away 3 months later, Michael was by my side, solid and supportive through the funeral arrangements and the difficult weeks that followed. His firm granted him compassionate leave, and he used that time to help me organize my father's affairs and begin the grieving process. It was during this period that I found a sealed envelope in my father's desk drawer addressed to me with "Private" written across the front. Inside was a key and a handwritten note: "For the safety deposit box at First Capital Bank, only if necessary. Love, Dad." I showed it to Michael, who examined the key with mild curiosity. "Probably just some family heirlooms or documents," he suggested. "We can check it out once things settle down." But something in my father's emphasis, "only if necessary," made me hesitate. I tucked the key into my jewelry box instead, an action that would prove pivotal in the months to come. As life resumed its normal pace after my father's death, I threw myself into my career with renewed focus. The grief and failed fertility treatments had left me craving professional accomplishment, something tangible I could control and achieve. When an executive position opened up at the hotel group, director of special projects, reporting directly to the CEO, I applied, despite knowing it would require longer hours and occasional travel. Michael's reaction to my career ambitions was unexpectedly negative. "Is this really the right time for such a demanding role?" he questioned when I told him about the interviews. "We're still trying to start a family, and you're still processing your father's death." His concern seemed genuine, but something in his tone felt off, less worried about my well-being and more concerned about the potential disruption to our carefully structured lives. Lives that, I was beginning to realize, were structured primarily around his needs and schedule. Despite his reservations, I pursued and ultimately secured the position. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, putting my earnings nearly on par with Michael's, a fact that seemed to unsettle him in ways I couldn't quite articulate. 3 weeks into my new role, I returned home early from a business dinner to find our house empty and dark. Michael had texted earlier that he'd be working late, a common occurrence. What was uncommon was the unfamiliar perfume lingering in our bedroom and a long blonde hair on his pillow. I am brunette. I have been my entire life. Standing in our bedroom, holding that single blonde hair between my fingers, I felt something shift inside me. The first crack in the foundation of trust I'd built my marriage upon. That night, I didn't confront Michael. Instead, I began paying closer attention, noting patterns I'd previously dismissed. The new password on his phone, the credit card statements he now received electronically instead of by mail, the networking, events that never seemed to have digital invitations or follow-up emails. The woman with the blonde hair remained a mystery, but her presence in my marriage became increasingly difficult to ignore. By the time our 10th anniversary approached, I was living in a state of painful awareness, gathering evidence while maintaining a facade of normalcy. Which brings us back to that text message at Bellini's, the 7 words that confirmed everything I had suspected but couldn't prove. When are you leaving her? I can't keep waiting for... The morning after our anniversary dinner, I awoke before Michael. He was sleeping soundly beside me, one arm flung above his head like a child, vulnerable in a way he never appeared while awake. For a moment, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest, I almost convinced myself that I had imagined everything: the text, the blonde hair, the subtle distancing that had characterized our marriage for months. But the weight in my chest told a different story. Reality doesn't disappear with daylight. It only becomes clearer. I slipped out of bed without waking him and padded to the kitchen to make coffee. Our anniversary gifts sat on the dining room table: the vintage watch I had given him, still in its box, and the diamond earrings he had presented to me with a flourish and a kiss. Expensive, tasteful, impersonal. I wondered if she had helped him choose them, or if he maintained a mental catalog of appropriate gifts for a wife versus a mistress. As the coffee brewed, I checked the time. 7:15 a.m. Michael wouldn't wake for another 45 minutes. He was meticulous about his morning routine: 8 a.m. alarm, 8:15 shower, 8:45 breakfast, 9:30 departure for the office. This predictability, once comforting, now provided me with the opportunity I needed. I carried my coffee to our home office and quietly closed the door. Michael's laptop sat on the desk, closed but not locked. He always entered his password first thing in the morning to check emails before heading to the firm. I hesitated only briefly before opening it and navigating to his Google account settings. The recent devices list confirmed what I already suspected: activity from an iPhone and MacBook that weren't mine or his work computer. Someone else was logged into his accounts. I didn't need to see more. I closed the laptop exactly as I'd found it, my suspicions further validated. Back in the kitchen, I began preparing Michael's favorite breakfast: avocado toast with poached eggs and crispy prosciutto. The domesticity of the act struck me as absurd given the circumstances, but maintaining normalcy was crucial for what I planned to do next. Michael appeared in the kitchen doorway at precisely 8:47, freshly showered and immaculately dressed in one of his bespoke suits, his hair still damp. He smiled when he saw the breakfast spread. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, coming up behind me to kiss my cheek. "Last night was supposed to be about pampering you." I turned, offering my most convincing smile. "I wanted to. Besides, I'm heading into the office early today. That London conference call I told you about? This was a lie. There was no conference call. But Michael's slight nod confirmed he wasn't paying close enough attention to my schedule to catch the fabrication. Right, the London thing, he said, pouring himself coffee. What time will you be home tonight? Probably late, I replied, watching his reaction carefully. The Tokyo team wants to connect after London, so I'll likely have dinner at the office. A flicker of something, relief, crossed his face before he masked it with an appropriate show of disappointment. That's too bad. I was hoping we could continue our celebration tonight. He checked his watch, the Rolex he wore daily, not the vintage piece I'd given him. Actually, I might have to work late too. The Peterson merger is heating up. How convenient. The Peterson merger had been heating up for months, providing perfect cover for late nights and weekend emergency meetings. I wondered briefly if the blonde woman worked at his firm or if their connection was through a client. Either way, my fabricated late night had clearly given him the opening he wanted. We'll celebrate another night, I said lightly, gathering my purse and keys. I should get going. That report won't review itself. Michael caught my arm as I moved past him, pulling me into an embrace that felt rehearsed, a performance of husbandly affection. I had a wonderful time last night, he murmured against my hair. You looked beautiful. The compliment, once treasured, now felt hollow. Had he texted her the same words after our anniversary dinner? Was their relationship built on the same practiced charm he had once used to win me? I'm glad, I replied, extracting myself from his arms. See you tonight, or tomorrow, depending on how late we both work. As I drove away from our home, I called my office and arranged to work remotely for the day, citing a personal matter that needed attention. My assistant Riley didn't question it. My perfect attendance record and recent promotion had earned me considerable flexibility. Instead of heading downtown, I drove to First Capital Bank, the key from my father's desk securely in my purse. The morning traffic moved sluggishly, giving me ample time to consider what might be waiting in that safety deposit box. Money, legal documents, or something else entirely? The bank manager, an older woman named Patricia with silver-rimmed glasses and a formal demeanor, verified my identification and led me to the vault area. Your father accessed this box regularly for years, she commented as we walked. He was always very particular about maintaining it properly. This information surprised me. I had assumed the safety deposit box was a recent arrangement, something established during his illness. The idea that my father had been planning, preparing for years, sent an uncomfortable chill through me. Patricia left me alone in a small private room with the metal box retrieved from the vault. With trembling fingers, I inserted the key and lifted the lid. Inside, neatly organized, I found several labeled folders, a USB drive, and a sealed envelope with my name handwritten across the front. I opened the envelope first, recognizing my father's distinctive handwriting. Natalie, if you're reading this, I can only assume my suspicions about Michael have proven correct. I'm sorry for that. Genuinely sorry. No father wants to see his daughter's heart broken. I've watched him for years. Noticed the patterns you were too close to see. The way his eyes follow other women when you're not looking. The convenient timing of his work emergencies. The small inconsistencies in his stories that he covers with charm and deflection. Men like Michael are practiced deceivers. They don't change, they just become more careful. I couldn't stop you from marrying him. I tried, perhaps not in the right ways, but I could prepare for the day when his true nature revealed itself. That's what this box contains: protection for your future, insurance against the damage he will inevitably cause. The red folder contains legal documents establishing the Natalie Reynolds Trust, currently valued at approximately $2. $8 million. This trust was created 7 years ago with the proceeds from the sale of my company's Eastern Division. Money I never told you about because I wanted it secured for exactly this purpose. The trust has specific activation conditions. It remains dormant until and unless your marriage ends due to Michael's infidelity. My attorney, Peter Griffith, has detailed instructions and all necessary documentation. The blue folder contains his contact information and copies of the key provisions. The USB drive contains digital evidence I've gathered over the years. Nothing illegal, just careful observation and documentation of patterns. Credit card receipts, timestamps, photographs, taken at public events. Small things individually, but revealing when viewed collectively. I know this is painful. I know you loved, perhaps still love Michael. But love shouldn't require blindness. It shouldn't demand that you ignore your own value. You are my daughter, Natalie. You are stronger than you know, smarter than you. Give yourself credit for and worth far more than the value Michael places on you. With love and faith in your strength, Dad tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. Not tears of sadness, but of a complex mixture of grief, vindication, and a strange sense of comfort knowing my father had seen the truth long before I was ready to acknowledge it. I opened the red folder with unsteady hands, scanning the legal documents within. The trust was indeed substantial, $2 to $8 million plus accumulated interest, invested conservatively in blue-chip stocks and municipal bonds. More than enough to restart my life completely if necessary. But the most surprising document wasn't financial at all. It was a detailed record of Michael's connection to Bennett and Walsh's most significant client, Weston Capital. My father had somehow discovered that Weston's portfolio included several luxury hotel properties, hotels that were now under the management of the very company I had recently been promoted within. The implication was clear. Michael's firm and my company were now professionally entangled through Weston Capital. If this relationship became complicated by a messy divorce, particularly one involving infidelity by a partner at Bennett and Walsh, the repercussions could be significant for both Michael's professional standing and the firm's relationship with their premier client. My father, even in death, had created leverage I never could have engineered myself. The blue folder contained Peter Griffith's business card, along with a handwritten note from my father. Peter knows everything. He's expecting your call if this day ever comes. Finally, I inserted the USB drive into my phone using an adapter from my purse. The files were meticulously organized by date, going back almost to the beginning of my relationship with Michael. Photos taken at charity events showing Michael's hand lingering too long on a colleague's waist while I chatted with guests across the room. Credit card statements showing charges at hotels in cities where he claimed to be at conferences, but on dates that didn't match the conference schedules. Email headers from a private account I didn't recognize. My father had been thorough, methodical, and discreet. He hadn't intervened directly or confronted Michael. That would have only pushed me further into defending my husband. Instead, he had quietly built a case, prepared resources, and waited for the day when I would need them. I sat in that small room for over an hour, absorbing everything. By the time I carefully repacked the box and returned it to the vault, asking Patricia to maintain its security, my shock had transformed into something more purposeful. Not rage, not even heartbreak anymore, but a clear-eyed determination. As I drove away from the bank, I made two decisions. I would call Peter Griffith, and I would not confront Michael. Not yet. The tactical advantage my father had provided was too valuable to squander in an emotional confrontation that would only give Michael time to prepare his defenses. Instead, I would observe, document, and plan, just as my father had done. I would maintain the facade of our perfect marriage while quietly placing the pieces that would ensure my protection when everything finally came to light. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly those pieces would need to be moved, or that the catalyst would come not from Michael, but from the blonde woman who was apparently growing impatient with his timeline for leaving me. 2 days after discovering my father's safety deposit box, I sat across from Peter Griffith in his downtown office, a space that emanated old-world professionalism with its leather chairs and walls lined with law books. At 60-something, with salt-and-pepper hair and shrewd eyes behind rimless glasses, Peter had been my father's attorney and friend for over 30 years. "Harold prepared extensively for this possibility," Peter said, reviewing the documents I'd brought from the safety deposit box. "Though he hoped you'd never need to use these provisions." "I still can't believe he went to such lengths," I replied, feeling both grateful and unsettled by my father's foresight. Creating a trust contingent on Michael's infidelity. Gathering evidence for years. Peter's expression softened. "Your father was a thorough man in everything he did. When he recognized potential harm to someone he loved, he didn't just worry, he created safeguards." He placed the documents in a folder and leaned forward. "The question now is, what do you want to do with these safeguards, Natalie?" It was the question I'd been grappling with since leaving the bank. What did I want? Revenge? Security? Freedom? All of the above? "I need time to think strategically," I finally answered. "Michael doesn't know about any of this, and I'd like to keep it that way until I decide how to proceed." Peter nodded approvingly. "A wise approach. The trust activation requires legal confirmation of infidelity, which means either Michael's admission or substantial evidence that would satisfy a court. We have good preliminary documentation thanks to your father, but we should gather more recent evidence." "What would you recommend?" "I would suggest hiring a licensed private investigator," Peter replied, sliding a business card across his desk. "Calvin Reed is discreet, thorough, and specialized in matrimonial investigations. Your father actually retained his services several times over the years to compile some of this evidence." The revelation that my father had gone so far as to hire a private investigator sent another shock through me. Had he been right to be so distrustful? The evidence suggested yes, but it still felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life, following a script written years before. "There's another matter to discuss," Peter continued. "The hotel management contract between your company and Weston Capital. Your father identified this connection as potentially significant leverage." "I'm aware of the relationship," I said cautiously. "My recent promotion puts me in closer contact with the Weston portfolio, but I'm not directly involved in their account management." "That may be sufficient," Peter mused. "The mere fact that scandal involving a Bennett and Walsh partner could complicate their relationship with a major client creates pressure that could be advantageous during settlement negotiations." By the time I left Peter's office, we had developed a preliminary strategy: gather definitive evidence of Michael's infidelity, prepare divorce filings but not submit them, and continue normal life while I considered my options. The trust would remain dormant until formally activated, but Peter assured me that all systems were in place for immediate action when needed. For the next week, I performed the role of devoted wife with Oscar-worthy precision. I prepared Michael's favorite meals, listened attentively to his stories about work, and maintained our regular routines. If he noticed any change in my behavior, he gave no indication. Meanwhile, Calvin Reed was methodically documenting Michael's activities. Our first meeting had been brief but productive. I provided him with Michael's schedule, habits, and the scraps of information I had about the blonde woman. Calvin was professional and matter-of-fact, treating the situation with neither judgment nor unnecessary sympathy. "These cases follow patterns," he explained. "Once we identify the rendezvous locations and communication methods, documenting the affair becomes straightforward." Calvin's initial report came faster than expected. Just 5 days after our meeting, he sent an encrypted email with a subject: "Line we had agreed upon, conference schedule update." Inside was a simple message: "Preliminary findings ready for review. Available to meet at your convenience." I arranged to meet him during my lunch break at a quiet cafe several blocks from both my office and Michael's firm. Calvin arrived, carrying a nondescript laptop bag, his appearance so conventional he was almost invisible among the business lunch crowd. "Your husband has established a regular pattern," he began after we ordered coffee. "He meets the woman, identified as Veronica Winters, every Tuesday and Thursday at the Archer Hotel. They typically arrive separately between 12:30 and 1 p.m. and depart by 2:30 p.m. The Archer was an upscale boutique hotel downtown, less so than a mile from Bennett and Walsh, convenient for lunchtime rendezvous. Ms. Winters is an associate attorney at Caldwell and Price," Calvin continued, showing me a professional headshot from the firm's website. "They appear to have met approximately 8 months ago during depositions for the Suntech merger case. 8 months. While I was still grieving my father and undergoing fertility treatments, Michael had been starting an affair. I've documented 4 meetings in the past week and a half," Calvin said, opening his laptop to show me time-stamped photographs. "The evidence is conclusive. The images were undeniable. Michael and a blonde woman, Veronica, entering and leaving the hotel separately but within minutes of each other. One especially clear photograph showed them kissing in the hotel bar before heading to the elevators." I stared at the pictures, feeling strangely detached. The woman was beautiful in a polished, deliberate way. Expensively highlighted blonde hair, designer clothing, the same sophisticated style that Michael had always appreciated. She looked younger than me, perhaps early 30s to my 38, but it wasn't just youth that distinguished her. She projected an eagerness, an ambition that reminded me of myself when I'd first met Michael. "There's something else you should know," Calvin said, hesitating for the first time. "Based on multiple conversations I've overheard and surveillance of their text communications when possible, Ms. Winters appears to be under the impression that Mr. Reynolds intends to leave his marriage soon. She's been increasingly insistent about establishing a timeline. The text from our anniversary dinner suddenly made perfect sense. When are you leaving her? I can't keep waiting for what? For him to find the right moment? For him to secure his partnership further? For him to ensure I wouldn't cause problems for his career?" "I see," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "And has Michael given her a timeline?" Calvin looked uncomfortable. He's been evasive in his responses. Reassuring but non-committal. My professional assessment is that he's stalling. Stalling. The word hung between us, laden with implications. Was Michael genuinely conflicted about leaving our marriage? Was he calculating the financial implications? Or was he simply enjoying the benefits of both relationships for as long as possible? "There's one more thing," Calvin added, sliding a small digital recorder across the table. "This was captured yesterday at the Archer. I believe you should hear it." I positioned the recorder discreetly beside my coffee cup and pressed play. The audio quality was surprisingly good, though ambient noise from the hotel bar created a consistent background murmur. "You promised, Michael." Veronica's voice was clear, tense with frustration. "After your partnership was secure, after the firm's review period. That was 3 months ago." "It's complicated, Ronnie." Michael's voice, so familiar yet strange in this context. "Natalie's been through a lot with her father's death, and now this promotion. It's a delicate situation." "Delicate?" Her tone sharpened. "What's delicate is making me wait in the shadows while you play house with your wife. I'm not asking for dramatic gestures, just honesty. Tell her it's over." "The timing isn't right." Michael's voice lowered, becoming harder to hear. "The Weston Capital deal is crucial for the firm. Natalie's company just took over management of 3 of their hotel properties. If this goes badly, it could affect millions in legal fees." My breath caught. So that was it. Not emotional conflict or even fear of financial settlement, but professional consequences. Michael was protecting his standing at the firm, ensuring the Weston relationship remained untainted by personal scandal. "I don't care about Weston Capital," Veronica hissed. I care about wasting my 30s waiting for you to find the perfect moment. There is no perfect moment, Michael. There's just now and later, and I'm tired of later. The recording continued, with Michael offering more placating words, promises of soon and just a little longer, until they apparently moved away from the microphone's range. Calvin switched off the recorder. I believe this provides clear motivation for Mr. Reynolds' hesitation. The professional entanglement between his firm's client and your company creates potential complications he's trying to avoid. I sat back, absorbing this final confirmation. The leverage my father had identified was real. Real enough that Michael was delaying his plans with Veronica to protect his professional interests. What happens now? Calvin asked after giving me a moment to process. What happened next was entirely unexpected. That evening, I arrived home before Michael, my mind still racing with everything I'd learned. I changed from my work clothes into casual wear and opened a bottle of wine, pouring a single glass that I took out to our small garden patio. The early summer evening was warm, the sunset painting the sky in dramatic strokes of orange and pink. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Working late, don't wait up. Of course he was. I wondered if he was actually working or with Veronica, perhaps trying to pacify her after yesterday's tense conversation. I didn't respond, simply set my phone on the patio table and tried to quiet my racing thoughts. Around 9:30 p.m., the unexpected happened. My doorbell rang. Curious and slightly wary, I made my way to the front door and checked the security camera on our doorbell system. A woman stood on my porch, blonde, stylish, visibly agitated. Veronica Winters. My heart hammered against my ribs as I considered my options. I could ignore her, pretend I wasn't home. I could call Michael and alert him that his mistress had arrived at our door, or I could face her directly. Before I could decide, she rang the bell again, then began knocking with increasing urgency. With a deep breath, I opened the door. Up close, she was even more striking than in the photographs. Flawless makeup, expensive perfume, the kind of confident beauty that turns heads. Her expression cycled rapidly from surprise to confusion to something harder when she realized who I was. "You must be Natalie," she said, her voice matching the one I'd heard on Calvin's recording. "I'm Veronica Winters. I know who you are," I replied, keeping my voice neutral despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "Michael isn't here." "Good. I came to talk to you, not him." She adjusted her designer handbag on her shoulder, a nervous gesture at odds with her polished appearance. "May I come in?" Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous territory, that inviting my husband's mistress into my home could only lead to more pain. But another part of me, perhaps my father's daughter after all, recognized this as a potential advantage, an unexpected source of information. I stepped aside, allowing her to enter. Veronica moved into my living room with the tentative steps of someone entering enemy territory, her eyes taking in the photographs on the mantel. Michael and me in happier times, my father and me at my college graduation, the professionally taken portrait from our wedding day. "I shouldn't be here," she said suddenly, though she made no move to leave. "This is inappropriate." "I think we passed inappropriate some time ago, don't you?" I gestured to the sofa. "Please sit. Would you like some wine? I was just having a glass myself." The absurd civility of the moment struck me as almost comical. Here I was, offering hospitality to the woman sleeping with my husband. Veronica perched on the edge of the sofa, declining the wine with a slight shake of her head. "I came because I think you deserve to know the truth. Michael has been lying to both of us." "That much I've gathered," I said, taking a seat opposite her. "What specifically brings you to my creating and sharing this story has taken significant time and emotional effort. If you're finding value in my journey, please hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything, and it encourages me to continue sharing these difficult but important life lessons. What specifically brings you to my doorstep tonight? I asked Veronica, maintaining a composure that surprised even me. She clasped her hands tightly in her lap, manicured nails digging into her skin. Yesterday, Michael told me he needs more time before ending your marriage. He said it's because of your recent promotion and some connection to Weston Capital. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. But this morning I discovered something. Veronica reached into her handbag and withdrew an envelope. I was at his apartment. His apartment? I interrupted, genuinely confused. Michael and I owned our townhouse together. We had no other properties. Veronica's expression shifted from determination to surprise. The loft downtown? On Riverside? He's had it for over a year. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Michael had a separate apartment I knew nothing about, maintained for what purpose? The affair, obviously, but the time frame suggested he'd secured it well before meeting. Veronica, I see, I said, fighting to maintain my composure. Please continue. I was looking for a phone charger in his desk drawer and found this. She handed me the envelope. It's a life insurance policy. On you. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope. Inside was indeed a life insurance policy, taken out 18 months ago, listing me as the insured and Michael as the sole beneficiary. The death benefit was $5 million. At first, I thought it was just normal financial planning, Veronica continued, her voice tightening. But then I saw this. She leaned forward, pointing to a specific clause in the policy. It's a double indemnity rider. If you die in an accident, it pays $10 million. The room seemed to tilt slightly as the implications sank in. A secret apartment, a substantial life insurance policy I'd never consented to or signed, somehow executed, using what appeared to be my forged signature. A mistress who was growing increasingly impatient. When I confronted him, Michael said it was just smart financial planning in case something happened to you. He said all wealthy couples have insurance on each other. Veronica's voice was strained. But the way he dismissed my concerns, the way he became angry when I kept questioning him, something felt very wrong. Why are you telling me this? I asked, genuinely curious about her motives. You want him to leave me. This doesn't accomplish that. Veronica looked directly at me, her composed veneer cracking to reveal genuine fear. Because I realized today that I don't know who Michael really is, and because if anything happened to you, I'd be the obvious suspect or accomplice. She swallowed hard. I'm ambitious, and yes, I've made terrible choices getting involved with a married man, but I'm not. I would never be part of. She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. The unspoken suggestion hung in the air between us. Michael might have been considering a permanent, tragic solution to his Veronica or Natalie dilemma. A solution that would leave him financially set with $10 million and free to console himself in Veronica's arms, provided she remained ignorant of his potential plans. I don't know if he would, actually. Veronica trailed off again. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it is just financial planning. But the timing, the secret apartment, the way he's been acting lately, erratic, checking your schedule constantly, asking about your travel plans for work. My mind flashed to Michael's unusual interest in my upcoming business trip to Chicago, his repeated confirmations of my departure date and flight details. He kept saying how much simpler everything would be if certain obstacles weren't in the way, Veronica continued. I thought he meant legal complications or financial entanglements. But what if I was the obstacle? I finished softly. We sat in silence for a long moment, two women connected by the same man, confronting a possibility too disturbing to fully articulate. The irony wasn't lost on me that Veronica had potentially saved me from a fate Michael might have been contemplating, all because she discovered something that threatened her as well. Does Michael know you found this? I finally asked, holding up the policy. No. I put it back exactly as I found it. I told him I had a client emergency and left. Veronica glanced nervously at the door. He thinks I'm at my apartment now. I turned off location sharing on my phone. Another thought struck me. Does Michael have a key to your apartment? Veronica nodded slowly, the color draining from her face as she followed my train of thought. You think I'm in danger too? I think caution is warranted, I replied carefully. Do you have somewhere else you can stay tonight? A friend Michael doesn't know about, perhaps. My sister's in Westlake. He's never met her. Good. Go there. Don't tell Michael where you are. I stood, decision crystallizing with remarkable clarity. And Veronica? Thank you for coming here. Whatever your motives, I appreciate knowing the truth. She rose as well, relief evident in her expression, relief at unburdening herself, at having someone else validate her concerns, at the prospect of escape from a situation that had grown far darker than a typical affair. What will you do? She asked, pausing at the door. I thought of my father's safety deposit box, of Peter Griffith waiting for my call, of the trust that would activate once Michael's infidelity was legally established. I'll protect myself, I answered simply. I suggest you do the same. After Veronica left, I methodically moved through our home, gathering essential documents, cherished photographs, irreplaceable mementos from my father. I packed a small suitcase with enough clothing for several days, then made 2 phone calls, one to a hotel across town to book a room under my maiden name, and one to Peter Griffith's emergency line. Peter answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. Natalie, what's happened? The situation has escalated beyond infidelity, I explained, keeping my voice low despite being alone in the house. I need to activate the trust immediately. And Peter, I need additional legal help. I believe Michael may have taken out a fraudulent insurance policy on my life. The sharp intake of breath told me Peter understood the gravity of what I was suggesting. Where are you now? Still at home, but I'm leaving within the hour. I've booked a room at the West Grove Hotel under Reynolds. I'll be there by 11. I'll meet you there. Don't tell anyone else where you're going. And Natalie? His voice tightened with urgency. Take only your own vehicle. Don't use rideshare services or taxis that could be traced. After ending the call, I made one final stop, our home office. With the new information about the insurance policy in mind, I examined Michael's desk more carefully than ever before. In the back of the bottom drawer, concealed beneath hanging files, I discovered a false bottom. Inside was a small safe box, secured with a combination lock. I tried Michael's birthday, no success. Our anniversary date, nothing. Then, on a hunch, I tried the date he'd made partner at the firm. The lock clicked open. Inside was a second phone I'd never seen before, several flash drives, and a manila folder containing copies of my medical records from fertility treatments, highlighted passages on hormone medications and their side effects, and printouts of news articles about seemingly accidental deaths of spouses. One headline was circled in red ink: Grieving husband receives 8 hours after wife's fatal fall ruled accidental. A chill ran through me unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not fear, exactly, but a terrible clarity. The man I had loved, had tried to build a family with, had been methodically researching ways that I might die without arousing suspicion. How had I missed this darkness in him? Had it always been there, carefully concealed behind charm and ambition? Or had it developed gradually, his moral compass eroding as his priorities shifted? Taking photos of everything with my phone, I carefully replaced the items exactly as I'd found them, closed the safe box, and returned it to its hiding place. This evidence, combined with Veronica's testimony about the insurance policy, would be crucial in the days to come. As I prepared to leave the house, possibly for the last time, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Wrapping up soon. Should be home by midnight. Don't wait up. I didn't reply. By midnight, I would be checking into the West Grove under my maiden name, meeting with Peter Griffith, and setting in motion the legal mechanisms my father had so presciently established years ago. I took one final look around the living room, at the carefully selected furniture, the tasteful artwork, the photographs documenting a marriage that had been unraveling long before I recognized the signs. Then I picked up my suitcase, walked out the door, and quietly closed it behind me. As I drove through the darkened streets toward temporary safety, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in just 10 days. From the anniversary dinner where I'd glimpsed that fateful text message to this moment of flight from the man who may have been planning my demise. My father had prepared for Michael's infidelity, creating financial protection I'd never expected to need. But even he couldn't have anticipated how sinister the situation would become, how the stakes would escalate from heartbreak to potential life and death. The rain began to fall as I neared the hotel, droplets illuminated in my headlights like tiny shooting stars. Appropriate weather for the storm that was about to break over my marriage, Michael's career, and the carefully constructed life we'd built on a foundation of lies. I pulled into the hotel parking garage at 10:47 p.m., choosing a spot near the elevator but partially concealed by a concrete pillar. As I gathered my belongings, my phone lit up with another text from Michael. "Where are you? Your car isn't in the garage." So he had come home early, perhaps eager to check that I was safely where he expected me to be. I turned off my phone, without responding. Any communication now would only complicate an already dangerous situation. Peter was waiting in the hotel lobby as promised, looking grave but composed. Beside him stood a woman he introduced as Shannon Torres, a criminal defense attorney he had brought in given the potential insurance fraud implications. "We've secured a conference room," Peter explained, leading me through the quiet lobby. "It's more secure than your room for this discussion." In that hotel conference room, under the harsh fluorescent lighting that made everything seem surreal, I laid out the entire situation: the affair, Veronica's unexpected visit, the insurance, policy, and the disturbing contents of Michael's hidden safe box. Shannon took detailed notes, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "This goes well beyond divorce proceedings," she said finally. "We're looking at potential insurance fraud, forgery, and possibly conspiracy to commit murder, though that would be much harder to prove without explicit evidence of intent. The primary concern right now is your safety," Peter added. "We need to file for an emergency protective order immediately." "But that would alert Michael that I know everything," I pointed out. "If he really was planning something, wouldn't that make him more dangerous, more desperate?" Shannon and Peter exchanged concerned glances. "That's a valid concern," Shannon acknowledged, "but we can't leave you unprotected either. I suggest we move on multiple fronts simultaneously, secure the protective order, formally activate the trust, and contact law enforcement about the insurance fraud." "There's something else to consider," Peter said carefully. "The trust activation. It's specifically triggered by infidelity, which we can now definitively prove. Once activated, it not only provides you with financial independence, but also initiates certain protective measures your father put in place." "What kind of protective measures?" I asked, not recalling anything beyond the financial aspects in the documents I'd reviewed. "Harold arranged for immediate notification of several key parties in the event of activation," Peter explained. "The managing partners at Bennett and Walsh would receive documentation of Michael's affair with another attorney, specifically highlighting the potential ethics violations and conflicts of interest. Similarly, executives at Weston Capital would be informed of possible compromises to their legal representation." My father's foresight was once again astounding. He had created not just financial protection but professional consequences that would immediately undermine Michael's position of power. "There's no going back once we initiate these measures," Peter warned. "Your marriage will effectively be over, and Michael's career will likely suffer significant damage. Given what we now know about the insurance policy and his possible intentions, I believe these steps are warranted, but the decision must be yours, Natalie. The weight of the choice before me was momentous. Despite everything I'd discovered, some small part of me still struggled to reconcile the Michael I had loved with the man who might have been plotting my death. But as I looked at the evidence spread across the conference table, the insurance policy, the photographs of Michael with Veronica, the pictures I'd taken of his hidden research, the path forward became clear. Activate everything, I said, firmly. The trust, the notifications, all of it. And let's file police reports about the insurance fraud immediately. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. My father tried to warn me about Michael years ago. I should have listened then. I'm listening now. Shannon nodded approvingly while Peter reached for his phone to set the machinery of justice in motion. The storm had broken. By morning, Michael's carefully constructed world would begin to crumble, and he would discover that the woman he had underestimated, the wife he had betrayed and possibly planned to eliminate, was now his most dangerous adversary. The morning after I fled my home, I sat in Peter Griffith's office watching the systematic dismantling of Michael's life unfold with remarkable efficiency. My father's contingency plan, once activated, moved with the precision of a Swiss timepiece. By 9 a.m., the managing partners of Bennett & Walsh had received comprehensive documentation of Michael's affair with Veronica Winters, including evidence that they had used firm resources and billing hours for their rendezvous. The ethics violations alone were serious enough to warrant an emergency partner meeting, but the potential damage to the firm's relationship with Weston Capital elevated the situation to crisis level. Simultaneously, executives at Weston Capital received notification that their legal representation might have been compromised by personal conflicts within Bennett & Walsh. My father had been meticulous in his wording, no direct accusations, just enough information to raise serious concerns about Michael's professional judgment and discretion. Your father understood corporate politics masterfully, Peter observed as reports of the fallout began filtering back to us. He knew exactly which pressure points would create maximum impact. Meanwhile, Shannon Torres had arranged a meeting with Detective Sarah Mercer of the Financial Crimes Division to discuss the fraudulent insurance policy. Michael's forgery of my signature, his concealment of the policy's existence, and particularly the double indemnity clause for accidental death, created a compelling case for criminal investigation. It's not a slam dunk for attempted murder planning, Shannon cautioned, but the insurance fraud alone is a serious felony that could result in significant jail time. My phone, which I had briefly turned back on to check messages, exploded with notifications. 27 missed calls from Michael. 15 text messages ranging from concern to anger to desperate pleading. Where are you? I came home and you weren't there. Natalie, please call me. I'm worried. This is ridiculous. Whatever's wrong, we can talk about it. I'm calling hospitals. Is this some kind of game? And finally, sent at 7:14 a.m. I know you've talked to Veronica. Whatever she told you is a lie. Call me immediately. So he had figured out that Veronica had come to see me. I wondered briefly if she was safe at her sister's home or if Michael had confronted her too. I was about to turn my phone off again when it rang. Not Michael, but Riley, my assistant at work. Natalie, I'm so sorry to bother you, she began, her voice tense. I know you're taking personal time, but there's a situation here you should know about. A man from Bennett & Walsh is in the lobby demanding to see you. He's causing quite a scene. Michael at my workplace, the audacity was breathtaking. He says he's your husband, Riley continued, but security isn't letting him up since he's not on your approved visitor list. Should I tell them to send him away? I took a deep breath, weighing my options. Confronting Michael in a public place with security present might actually be safer than avoiding him entirely. And part of me, a part I wasn't particularly proud of, wanted to see his face when he realized just how thoroughly his world was collapsing. Tell security I'll come down, I decided, but have them stay close. and alert the head of security that this is a potentially volatile domestic situation. Peter looked alarmed. Natalie, I strongly advise against meeting with Michael right now. At least wait until the protective order is in place. I appreciate your concern, I said, gathering my purse. But I need to do this. He's already causing a scene at my workplace, which could damage my professional reputation. Better to address it directly in a controlled environment with security present. Shannon reluctantly agreed. If you're determined to do this, keep it brief. Don't engage in detailed discussions about the evidence or legal proceedings. And if you feel threatened in any way, even subtly, withdraw immediately. 20 minutes later, I walked into the marble-floored lobby of the Carrington Tower where my company occupied the top 5 floors. Michael stood near the security desk, his normally immaculate appearance noticeably disheveled, his suit wrinkled, his hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept. When he saw me, relief washed over his face, quickly replaced by a calculated composure. This transformation, from genuine emotion to strategic presentation, was so familiar, I wondered how I had ever missed its significance. Natalie, thank God, he said, moving toward me. I've been worried sick. 2 security guards flanked me, creating a protective barrier that stopped Michael several feet away. His eyes narrowed at this arrangement, understanding immediately that I had anticipated his arrival and taken precautions. Can we talk privately? He asked, gesturing toward the seating area in the corner of the lobby. Here is fine, I replied, maintaining a professional tone despite the thundering of my heart. What do you need, Michael? His expression hardened, slightly at my refusal, then softened again with practiced concern. What I need is to understand why my wife disappeared in the middle of the night without a word. Why you're not answering my calls. Why you apparently met with my colleague Veronica without telling me. Colleague, not mistress, not lover. The deliberate choice of words was so typical of Michael's careful framing. Is that really what you want to discuss? I asked quietly. Your colleague, Veronica? Not the insurance policy you took out on my life without my knowledge? Not the apartment you've been maintaining downtown? Not the research on spousal accidental deaths you've been collecting? The color drained from Michael's face so rapidly, I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed without words, the practiced responses failing him for perhaps the first time in his life. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally managed, but the denial was weak, automatic rather than convincing. I think you do, I countered. Just as I think you know that the managing partners at your firm received some interesting documentation this morning, as did the executives at Weston Capital. Michael's expression transformed again, shock giving way to calculation as he assessed this new information. Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you're doing, you need to stop, Natalie. You're making a serious mistake that could damage both of us. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Both of us, not just him. Actually, my mistake was ignoring my father's warnings about you years ago, I replied, surprising myself with my steady voice. He saw what I couldn't or wouldn't see, and he prepared for this day, Michael. He prepared very thoroughly. Understanding dawned, in Michael's eyes, followed by a flash of something darker, anger perhaps, or fear. Harold, he murmured, that interfering old man, even from the grave. Yes, even from the grave, I agreed. He left me well protected against exactly this situation. Michael glanced around the lobby, aware of the security guards watching, our interaction and the curious glances from people passing through. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more urgent. We need to talk privately, Natalie. There are explanations for everything you think you've discovered. The policy was for both of us. I have one on myself too, with you as beneficiary. The apartment is for out-of-town clients when hotels are booked. Veronica is manipulating you because she's unstable, obsessed with me after a brief professional mentorship. The lies flowed so smoothly, so convincingly that for a moment, I felt that familiar doubt creeping in. The doubt he had cultivated throughout our marriage whenever I questioned anything. But then I remembered the photographs, the text messages, the research on accidental deaths, and my resolve strengthened. "I've filed a police report about the insurance fraud," I said. Simply, "I've also initiated divorce proceedings and obtained an emergency protective order prohibiting you from contacting me or coming to my residence or workplace." Michael's facade cracked, his expression shifting from persuasive concern to cold fury. "You have no idea what you're doing," he hissed, stepping closer despite the security guards. "No idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, I think I finally do," I replied, holding my ground. "And, Michael? The trust has been activated. All of it." For a moment, confusion flickered across his face. He didn't yet understand what trust I was referring to. But he recognized the confidence in my tone, the absence of the uncertainty he had always counted on to maintain control. "Whatever Harold left you, it won't be enough," he said dismissively. "You're making enemies you can't afford to have, Natalie. People at my firm, at Weston, they won't look kindly on being dragged into our personal issues." I smiled then. Not unkindly, but with the quiet certainty of someone holding winning cards. "That's where you're wrong. My father didn't just leave me money, he left me leverage, specifically leverage involving Weston Capital's hotel properties, the ones my company now manages." Michael's expression froze as the implications registered. The professional consequences he had been so carefully trying to avoid by delaying his departure from our marriage were now unavoidable, triggered by his own actions. "Security will escort you out now," I said, nodding to the guards. "The protective order should be delivered to you formally within the hour. Don't contact me again, Michael. All communication should go through our respective attorneys." As the security guards moved to escort him toward the exit, Michael called over his shoulder, "This isn't over, Natalie. Not by a long shot." But it was over. We both knew it. The careful plans he had been making, whether they included leaving me for Veronica or something more sinister, had crumbled entirely. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. I watched him walk away, this stranger I had once loved, and felt an unexpected wave of something like pity. For all his intelligence, his ambition, his careful calculation, Michael had fatally underestimated two people: my father, who had seen through him from the beginning, and me, the wife he had assumed would remain oblivious and compliant until he decided her fate. Back in Peter's office an hour later, reports continued flowing in about the professional fallout. Michael had been placed on administrative leave pending an ethics investigation. Weston Capital's general counsel had requested a complete audit of all work performed by Bennett and Walsh, with specific emphasis on matters handled by Michael. Veronica Winters had reportedly resigned from Caldwell and Price effective immediately, her professional reputation tarnished by the revelation of her affair with a married partner from a competing firm. "The dominoes are falling exactly as your father anticipated," Peter observed, reviewing the updates. "Bennett and Walsh will almost certainly sever ties with Michael once they've contained the damage to their relationship with Weston. His career, at least in this city, is effectively over." "And the insurance investigation?" I asked, turning to Shannon. "Detective Mercer is moving quickly," she confirmed. "They've obtained warrants for Michael's financial records and will be searching the apartment today. The forgery alone is enough for criminal charges, but if they find evidence supporting a potential plan to harm you—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. We all understood the gravity of what that would mean. "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly exhausted by the morning's confrontation and its aftermath. "Now," Peter said kindly, "you begin rebuilding. The trust has been fully activated. providing you with financial independence. Your professional position remains secure, possibly even enhanced by the Weston Capital connection. And most importantly, you're safe. Safety. Such a simple concept, yet one I had been lacking for longer than I realized. Physical safety from whatever Michael might have been planning. Financial safety thanks to my father's foresight. Emotional safety to process the betrayal and deception without fear of consequences. There's something else, Peter added, opening a drawer in his desk. Your father left this for you, to be delivered when the trust activated. He handed me a sealed envelope, my name written in my father's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded a single sheet of paper. My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, then the protections I put in place have been needed and activated. I'm sorry for that. Sorry that Michael proved to be exactly who I feared he was. Sorry that you've had to endure the pain of that revelation, but I'm not sorry for preparing. I've watched too many capable, brilliant women diminished by men who value control above love, possession above partnership. I refuse to let that happen to my daughter without a fight. You may feel lost, right? Now, uncertain of the future you thought was secure. But remember this. The strength that will carry you forward didn't come from me or from my preparations. It was always within you, waiting for the moment when you would need it most. I believe in your resilience. I believe in your judgment, even when temporarily clouded by love. And I believe that the life waiting for you beyond this difficult passage will be richer, truer, and more authentically yours than anything you've known before. With infinite love and absolute faith in your strength. Dad tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. Not tears of loss or fear, but of profound gratitude for this final gift from my father. Not just the financial protection or the strategic leverage, but his unwavering belief in me. Even when I had dismissed his concerns, even when I had chosen Michael over his warnings, he had never stopped believing that eventually I would find my way to the truth. And he had been there waiting, his hand reaching from beyond the grave to ensure I wouldn't face that truth alone or unprotected. As I carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope, I felt something shift inside me. A weight lifting, yes, but also a strength settling into place. My father had been right. The capacity to face this crisis had always been within me. I had simply needed the catalyst to activate it, just as his trust had needed specific conditions to spring into action. "What are you thinking?" Peter asked, gently after giving me a moment to compose myself. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that my father would be pleased with how this morning went, and that for the first time in years I'm making decisions based on truth rather than illusion." The truth was stark but liberating. My marriage had been built on deception. My husband had betrayed me in ways that went beyond infidelity, potentially extending to threats against my life. The future I had envisioned, children, growing old, together, building a legacy, had never been real. But from that harsh truth came unexpected freedom. Freedom to reimagine my life on my own terms. Freedom to reclaim my identity separate from Michael's influence and expectations. Freedom to recognize my own strength, which had been there all along, waiting for the moment when I would finally need to call upon it. Outside Peter's office window, the city stretched beneath a clear blue sky, buildings gleaming in the midday sun. Somewhere in that urban landscape, Michael was facing the consequences of his actions, his carefully constructed life unraveling thread by thread. Meanwhile, I was just beginning to weave the new fabric of mine. In the weeks following the confrontation with Michael in my office lobby, events unfolded with a momentum that seemed to carry me along like a river after heavy rain. The protective order became permanent after Michael violated the temporary one by sending increasingly desperate emails and appearing at my hotel, despite explicit prohibitions against contact. Each violation strengthened my legal position while weakening his, a pattern that repeated across every aspect of our dissolution. "He's not handling this well," Shannon observed after a particularly vitriolic email from Michael was forwarded to her office. "Every aggressive action, every threat, every attempt to contact you, it's all being documented and added to both the divorce and criminal proceedings." This self-destructive pattern was so unlike the calculated, strategic Michael I had known that I sometimes wondered if I had ever really known him at all. The man who had methodically built his career, who navigated corporate politics with elegant precision, was now behaving like someone unraveling in real time. 3 major developments occurred almost simultaneously, approximately 1 month after I activated my father's trust. First, Bennett and Walsh officially terminated Michael's partnership following their internal ethics investigation. The press release cited irreconcilable differences regarding firm values and professional conduct, but industry insiders understood the true meaning. Michael had become a liability they could no longer afford. Second, the district attorney's office filed formal charges against Michael for insurance fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of client funds, the latter stemming from discoveries during the investigation that he had been improperly billing Weston Capital for hours spent with Veronica. The potential penalties included substantial fines and up to 7 years in prison. Third, and perhaps most unexpected, I received a call from Julian Weston himself, the reclusive founder of Weston Capital and a figure so prominent in business circles that he rarely engaged directly with anyone below C-suite level. "Ms. Reynolds," his deep voice rumbled over the phone, "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I felt a personal conversation was warranted given the circumstances." "Of course, Mr. Weston," I replied, trying to mask my surprise. "I appreciate you taking the time." "I'll be direct," he continued. "The situation with your husband and my company's legal representation has created significant concerns. However, your handling of the matter, specifically your transparency and professionalism, has been noted and appreciated." The conversation that followed was brief but consequential. Julian explained that Weston Capital was re-evaluating all of their professional relationships, including their hotel management contracts. However, based on my company's performance and my personal integrity during the crisis, they were inclined to not only maintain, but potentially expand our management role across their property portfolio. "We value partners who demonstrate character under pressure," Julian said before ending the call. "Your father was such a partner years ago when our companies first intersected. I see that same quality in you." The reference to my father caught me off guard. "You knew my father?" "Harold Reynolds? Certainly. One of the most principled men I ever did business with. We served on the East Ridge Development Board together for nearly a decade." Julian's voice softened with genuine respect. He spoke of you often, always with tremendous pride. Another connection I hadn't known about. Another thread in the protective tapestry my father had woven around me. How many such connections existed, I wondered. How many relationships he had cultivated, knowing they might someday provide support when I needed it most? After the call with Julian Weston, I sat in my office overlooking the city, processing everything that had happened. Michael's professional reputation was in tatters, his legal troubles mounting, his carefully constructed facade crumbling to reveal the moral emptiness beneath. Meanwhile, my career was flourishing, my financial security assured by both the trust and my own professional advancement, my path forward increasingly clear. This reversal of fortunes wasn't just satisfying, it was instructive. For years, Michael had positioned himself as the more capable partner, the one whose career took priority, whose judgment should prevail in major decisions. I had accepted this framing at least partly, deferring to him on financial matters, adapting my ambitions to accommodate his, believing his assessment of my capabilities rather than trusting my own perceptions. Now, facing the most significant crisis of my adult life, I was not only surviving, but thriving. The strength my father had always seen in me, The resilience he had trusted would emerge when tested was proving more than equal to the challenges before me. Even Veronica Winters, in her way, had demonstrated unexpected character. After her initial warning about the insurance policy, she had cooperated fully with both the divorce proceedings and the 3 months after the fateful anniversary dinner, where a single text message had unraveled my marriage. I stood in a downtown courtroom watching as Michael was led away in handcuffs. The trial had been mercifully brief. Faced with overwhelming evidence, including his own detailed research on accidental spousal deaths, Michael had accepted a plea deal on reduced charges of insurance fraud and forgery. 5 years, Shannon murmured beside me as the bailiff escorted Michael from the courtroom. With good behavior, he'll likely serve 3. I nodded, feeling strangely hollow as I watched this final chapter of our shared story close. Michael had not looked at me once during the proceedings, his gaze fixed straight ahead as if refusing to acknowledge my presence might somehow preserve what remained of his dignity. "Are you okay?" Shannon asked as we gathered our belongings. "I'm not sure what I feel," I admitted. Relief, certainly, but also a kind of grief, not for the marriage I lost, but for the one I thought I had. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered on the steps, hungry for comments about the sensational case that had captivated business and legal circles for months. The story had everything: wealth, betrayal, possible murder plots, and the dramatic reversal of fortune that saw Michael Reynolds, once a rising star in corporate law, now a convicted felon headed to prison. Shannon expertly guided me through a side exit, avoiding the media gauntlet. "Remember, you don't owe them your story. That belongs to you alone." My story. For so long, I had lived within the narrative Michael constructed. Successful lawyer and his supportive wife, power couple climbing in tandem toward an idealized future. Now I was writing my own narrative, 1 page at a time. The divorce had been finalized the previous week, remarkably straightforward given Michael's diminished leverage. With criminal charges pending and his professional reputation in ruins, he had little choice but to accept the terms my attorneys proposed. I retained all assets transferred through my father's trust, plus a considerable settlement reflecting Michael's attempted fraud and the duration of our marriage. Financial security was a tremendous gift, but the true transformation of those months went far deeper than monetary concerns. I had discovered capacities within myself that years of subtle undermining had obscured: resilience, clear judgment, decisive action when necessary. These qualities hadn't magically appeared during the crisis. They had been there all along, merely waiting for recognition and exercise. My professional life had flourished amid the personal tumult. The expanded relationship with Weston Capital had elevated my position within the company, resulting in a promotion to Executive Vice President of Special Projects, with oversight of their entire luxury property portfolio. The role came with challenges I would once have doubted my ability to handle, but now embraced as opportunities for growth. "Your father would be proud," Peter told me over lunch the day after my promotion was announced. "Not just of your professional success, but of how you've navigated this entire situation with grace and strength." "I wish he could have seen it," I said, feeling the familiar pang of missing him. "He did see it," Peter replied with quiet certainty. "He saw your potential long before you recognized it yourself. That's why he created such elaborate protections. Not because he thought you needed rescuing, but because he wanted to ensure you had time and space to discover your own capabilities." This perspective on my father's planning, as scaffolding rather than rescue, resonated deeply. He hadn't created the trust because he thought I was weak, but because he understood how gradually and insidiously my confidence had been eroded within my marriage. The financial and legal protections were simply tools to facilitate my rediscovery of strengths that had been systematically minimized. As summer turned to fall, I settled more comfortably into my new life. The condo in the Arts District became truly home, filled with books I'd always wanted to read, artwork that spoke to me rather than impressed visitors, furniture chosen for comfort rather than status. I reconnected with friends who had gradually fallen away during my marriage, restored my relationship with my sister who had never trusted Michael, and even began cautiously dating again. Not seeking replacement or distraction, but genuine connection based on mutual respect. Throughout this period of rebuilding, I carried a question that had lingered since the day Peter gave me my father's wooden box with its mysterious key. What did it unlock? I had examined it countless times, this ornate little key with its unusual teeth and decorative handle. It didn't match any lock in my new home, didn't fit safety deposit boxes at any local bank, didn't correspond to any property I knew my father had owned. The answer arrived unexpectedly on a crisp October morning, 8 months after my anniversary dinner with Michael. I was sorting through the last box of items from my father's home. Books, photographs, miscellaneous papers I hadn't been emotionally ready to address during his illness or after his death. At the bottom of the box, wrapped carefully in acid-free paper, I found a leather-bound journal I had never seen before. The book was obviously old, its cover worn smooth with handling, its pages yellowed at the edges. Inside, in my father's distinctive handwriting, was a detailed account spanning decades. Business insights, personal reflections, observations about people and relationships, including many about Michael that proved eerily accurate. He maintains eye contact too deliberately when discussing finances, looking for tells of belief rather than understanding. Classic indicator of someone accustomed to managing perceptions rather than conveying truth. Noticed at the engagement. Dinner. Touches Natalie differently when others are watching versus when he thinks no one observes. Performative affection is concerning. Board meeting today. Reynolds more focused on impressing senior partners than on client outcomes. Ambition without ethical anchoring leads to predictable destinations. Reading these observations, made years before my marriage began to visibly fracture, was both painful and validating. My father had seen through Michael's carefully constructed facade from the beginning, recognizing patterns I was too emotionally invested to perceive. As I turned the pages, a small envelope fell out, addressed simply, "For Natalie, when the time comes." Inside was a handwritten note. "My darling daughter, if you're reading this, you found my journal and likely discovered the truth about Michael. I'm sorry for that pain, but not sorry you found your way to clarity." The key in the wooden box opens the locked drawer of my desk in the lake house, the desk you always loved as a child. Inside that drawer is something I've saved for you, something I hope will help illuminate the path forward now that you've navigated the dark woods of deception. The lake house itself is yours now too. The deed transfer was arranged through Peter, conditional upon the trust activation. It's been waiting for you, just as this gift has been waiting. With all my love, Dad. The lake house, of course, my father's retreat in the Cascade Mountains, a place he had cherished but rarely visited in his final years as illness limited his travel. I had assumed it had been sold as part of his estate settlement, never thinking to ask about it specifically. That weekend, I made the 3-hour drive into the mountains, watching as urban sprawl gave way to suburbs, then to farmland, and finally to the dense forests surrounding the lake. The property was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits. A modest but beautifully built cabin overlooking the water, surrounded by towering pines and mountain views that took my breath away. Inside, everything was pristinely maintained, indicating that my father had arranged for ongoing care even as his own health declined. His desk, the antique roll top I had indeed admired as a child, stood by the picture window facing the lake, positioned to capture both morning light and the spectacular sunsets that painted the water gold and crimson. With trembling fingers, I inserted the ornate key from the wooden box into the locked bottom drawer. It turned smoothly, as if recently oiled, revealing a space that contained just 3 items: a small velvet jewelry box, a folded document, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. I opened the jewelry box first, gasping at what lay inside. My Grandmother's sapphire ring, a family heirloom I had believed lost years ago when Michael had arranged to have it professionally cleaned, only to report that the jeweler had damaged it beyond repair. Seeing it now, perfectly intact and gleaming in the afternoon light, I understood that Michael had likely sold or pawned the original, replacing it with a convincing replica I would never think to question. The document proved to be the original, deed to the lake house, transferred into my name with an effective date corresponding to the trust activation. But it was the letter that brought tears to my eyes, my father's final communication, written during his last days when he knew he wouldn't live to see the outcome of his careful planning. Natalie, if you're reading these words in this place, then many things have happened as I feared they might, but you have emerged stronger for the journey. The lake house has always represented clarity and peace to me, a place where the noise of the world fades and truth becomes easier to discern. I leave it to you now as more than just property. It's a sanctuary for rebuilding, for remembering who you truly are beyond the roles and expectations others have placed upon you. The woman who stands in this room reading this letter is the daughter I always knew you could be, resilient, clear-eyed, capable of facing difficult truths and emerging stronger for having done so. The sapphire ring represents your heritage, not just of material value, but of the strength that runs through the women in our family. Your grandmother wore it through war, widowhood, and rebuilding a life on her own terms. It belongs on your hand now, a reminder that you come from people who bend but never break. Whatever path you choose from here, professionally, personally, spiritually, know that it is truly yours to determine. The painful clarity you've gained through Michael's betrayal is a terrible gift, but a gift nonetheless. It has burned away illusion and revealed the bedrock of your true self. I have always seen you clearly, Natalie, even when you couldn't see yourself. Know that wherever I am now, I am watching with pride as you claim the life you deserve. One built on truth, self-knowledge, and the courage to stand firmly in your own light, with eternal love. Dad. As the sun began to set over the lake, casting long golden rays through the cabin windows, I slipped my grandmother's sapphire ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting all along for this moment of reclamation. Standing there in the gathering dusk, I felt a sense of completion, of cycles closing and new ones beginning. The devastating text message that had appeared on Michael's phone during our anniversary dinner had set in motion events I could never have anticipated, leading me not to destruction, but to reconstruction of my life, my sense of self, my understanding of what love truly means. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of grief, of fear so profound it felt like drowning. But through it all, invisible hands had supported me. My father's foresight, Peter's steady guidance, even Veronica's unexpected moment of moral clarity. Most importantly, I had discovered my own hands were stronger than I'd believed, capable of building a new life from the wreckage of the old one. The woman who had meekly accepted Michael's assessments of her capabilities, who had diminished herself to fit his expectations, who had ignored warning signs in pursuit of an idealized future, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone, wiser, more discerning, and infinitely more confident in her own judgment. Someone who understood that true partnership enhances rather than diminishes, that love without respect is merely possession, that security built on deception will inevitably collapse. As darkness fell over the lake, I lit a fire in the stone hearth and settled into the familiar comfort of my father's favorite chair. Tomorrow I would return to the city, to my expanding professional responsibilities, to the life I was creating on my own terms. But tonight, in this sanctuary my father had preserved for exactly this moment of transition, I would simply rest in the knowledge that I had survived the unimaginable and emerged not just intact, but transformed. 2 years have passed since that text message flashed across Michael's phone during our anniversary dinner. 2 years since the careful facade of our marriage crumbled, revealing the hollow deception at its core. 2 years of rebuilding, rediscovering, and reclaiming my authentic self. Michael is still serving his sentence, his release date approaching next spring. I occasionally receive updates through Peter, who monitors the case to ensure I'm prepared if any unexpected developments arise. According to prison officials, Michael has been a model inmate, participating in rehabilitation programs and financial literacy workshops for fellow prisoners. Whether this represents genuine remorse or simply his characteristic ability to adapt advantageously to any situation, I cannot say. I've long since stopped trying to understand what motivated him, whether he truly contemplated causing me harm or merely saw the insurance policy as financial protection during a planned exit from our marriage. The distinction matters for legal purposes, but has ceased to be significant in my personal healing. I've accepted that I may never fully comprehend the depth of his deception or the complex psychology behind it. What matters more is what I've learned through this extraordinary journey, lessons that have fundamentally altered how I navigate relationships, career, and my sense of self. First, and perhaps most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts. So often during my marriage, I dismissed my own uneasiness, rationalizing away concerns or attributing them to my own insecurity rather than recognizing them as my intuition signaling danger. Now I understand that those quiet internal warnings are wisdom speaking, not weakness. I've also gained profound clarity about the nature of true partnership, a relationship that requires one person to consistently diminish themselves to accommodate. The other isn't love. It's subjugation dressed in romantic language. Real connection enhances both people, creating space for growth rather than constraints that limit potential. The lake house has become my regular retreat, a place where I spend at least one weekend each month reconnecting with myself and honoring my father's memory. Last summer, I hosted a gathering there for the group of professionals who had helped me through the crisis: Peter and Shannon, Detective Mercer, who had built the criminal case against Michael, even Riley from my office, who had provided crucial support during the workplace confrontation. Surrounded by these people who had seen me at my most vulnerable yet never doubted my strength, I realized I had built something my marriage had always lacked: a community based on genuine mutual respect. Professionally, I've continued to thrive. The expanded relationship with Weston Capital proved to be just the beginning of a significant career evolution. When our company merged with an international hospitality group last year, I was appointed Chief Strategy Officer for the combined organization, a role that draws on both my event management background and the leadership skills I've developed since activating my father's trust. Julian Weston himself recommended me for the position, citing my exceptional grace under pressure and strategic thinking during complex situations. The irony isn't lost on me that Michael's attempts to control and potentially harm me led directly to professional opportunities he had always insisted were beyond my capabilities. My personal life has evolved as well, though not in ways I might have predicted. After the divorce, I had anticipated remaining single for years, perhaps indefinitely. The betrayal seemed too profound to risk vulnerability again. But healing doesn't follow predictable timelines, and connection often arrives when we're focused on other priorities. Thomas came into my life through work, an architect specializing in sustainable luxury design, contracted to renovate several of our hotel properties. Our professional relationship gradually evolved into friendship, characterized by stimulating conversation, shared values, and a refreshing directness I had forgotten was possible between two people. When our connection eventually deepened into romance, it was unlike anything I had experienced with Michael. Where Michael had subtly undermined my confidence, Thomas genuinely celebrates my success. Where Michael used charm to deflect difficult conversations, Thomas engages thoughtfully with even the most challenging topics. Where Michael's affection always felt somewhat performative, Thomas's care is consistent whether others are watching or not. Most importantly, this relationship developed without the desperate need that had characterized my marriage. I entered it not seeking completion or validation, but from a place of wholeness and self-sufficiency. My happiness doesn't depend on Thomas. It's enhanced by his presence in my life, but fundamentally generated from within. I wear my grandmother's sapphire ring on my right hand now, a daily reminder of the resilience that runs in my blood. The wooden box with its intricate carved branches sits on my desk at work, holding business cards and small mementos, ordinary contents for an extraordinary container, much like the ordinary days that now fill my once shattered life. The truth is, extraordinary crises often give way to ordinary healing, a gradual accumulation of unremarkable days that slowly restore what was broken. The shocking drama of Michael's betrayal and its aftermath has been replaced by the quiet satisfaction of a life authentically lived, choices consciously made, and relationships thoughtfully cultivated. If there's wisdom to be gleaned from my experience, perhaps it's this. The people who seek to diminish us often sense a strength in us that threatens them. Michael worked so diligently to undermine my confidence precisely because he recognized capacities in me that might eventually outshine his carefully constructed facade. His control was a response to my potential, not my weakness. I see this pattern repeated in stories shared by others who have survived deceptive relationships. The subtle erosion of self-esteem, the gradual isolation from supporters, the reframing of intuition as irrationality. These tactics aren't random. They're systematic attempts to suppress qualities that manipulators find threatening: independence, discernment, authentic connection with others. The moment we begin reclaiming these suppressed qualities is the moment the manipulator's power begins to wane. It's rarely a dramatic confrontation like mine in the office lobby with Michael. More often, it's a quiet internal shift, a decision to trust one's perceptions, to seek verification rather than accepting gaslighting, to confide in someone who might offer perspective untainted by the manipulator's influence. My father understood this dynamic, having observed it throughout his business career and personal relationships. His protection wasn't just financial, it was informational, creating space for me to see clearly what had been deliberately obscured. The trust provided security, but the greater gift was the validation of my perceptions and the affirmation of capabilities I had been conditioned to doubt. For those currently entangled in relationships that diminish rather than enhance, please, know this. The voices telling you you're overreacting, misinterpreting, or being too sensitive may be deliberately undermining your most valuable protection, your own intuition. The isolation you feel is not accidental, but tactical, and the strength needed to change your situation already exists within you, even if years of systematic undermining have buried it deep. Start with one small act of reclamation. Confide in someone trustworthy. Document discrepancies between words and actions. Research gaslighting and coercive control to recognize patterns. Create financial independence when possible, even if it's just a small secret account. These aren't disloyal acts. They're self-preservation in a situation designed to keep you dependent and doubting. Looking back now from the vantage point of 2 years healing, I can see that the text message during our anniversary dinner wasn't the beginning of the end. It was simply the moment when the end became unavoidable. The relationship had been fundamentally flawed from its inception, built on Michael's projection and my acquiescence rather than genuine mutual recognition. What appeared to be a catastrophic collapse was actually the necessary dismantling of illusion, painful but ultimately liberating. In its place, I've built something far more valuable: a life aligned with my authentic self, relationships based on genuine reciprocity, and the quiet confidence that comes from having faced deception and emerged with clearer vision. If my story resonates with you, if you recognize patterns from your own relationships or those of someone you care about, please subscribe to this channel. Tomorrow I'm sharing Red Flags I Missed, A detailed breakdown of the warning signs that were visible long before that fateful text message appeared on Michael's phone. Have you experienced a relationship where betrayal ultimately led to unexpected growth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today, to take their first step toward reclaiming their power. Thank you for joining me on this journey of revelation and reconstruction. Remember that our greatest challenges often conceal our most profound opportunities for growth, not because suffering is inherently valuable, but because overcoming deception brings us closer to our authentic selves and the lives we truly deserve. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.